When asked, Jesus tells Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world. For if it were, I would not be standing here before you." When Jesus says this, he is not admitting God's inability to act in the world, but reminding Pilate that there is something bigger out there than Rome. That despite all of Rome's glory and earthly power, it would not and could not prevail against the totality of God. Pretty bold words for a peasant carpenter to speak in the face of the state's ultimate power in that region. For the one without apparent authority to speak to someone with such authority in that day and in that way was dangerous then and now. The danger, of course, is that the one with present authority will act out of that authority to ensure that no one dares speak in that way again. That is what made the Old Testament prophets, Jesus, John the Baptist, and later the apostles, such a danger to those in authority. Voices calling out in the wilderness that go unchallenged. Authority knows, can, and does raise up insurrections. Insurrections that disrupt the balance of power that is perceived to exist. In those days, Pilate didn't have to give an accused insurrectionist the time of day. With the wave of his hand, he could have sent Jesus to the cross without ever having to face him. So why? Why does Pilate invite Jesus into the royal courts? Because there is a rumor that Jesus is of royal heritage too. And if he is, then to deal with him so insignificantly could bring reprisals against Rome. And that would not bode well for Pilate. So he brings the supposed king into the courts to stand before him so that he can see for himself if there is any real threat. Standing before him, Jesus does not look like a king, nor does he act like one. Royalty would not be dressed so humbly or act so meekly. Royalty would be properly adorned. They would be making demands, even issuing orders in defiance. Instead, Jesus stands before Pilate in simple clothing, talking with a still and almost quiet voice. Still, despite what Pilate sees in front of him, he appears to sense that the words Jesus uses are the words spoken by someone with perceived authority. So maybe that's why Pilate asked Jesus so directly, "So, you are a king?" When Jesus responds, I can just see Pilate now rolling his eyes and shaking his head. Pilate, like so many others, only feared that which was in the world, the things that could be seen, the things that could be touched. Not what might be out there, and certainly not that which seems illogical. For Jesus to tell Pilate that his kingdom is not of this world is like Captain Kirk in the Star Trek movie, The Journey Home, telling Dr. Jillian, he is from the future, come back through time to retrieve 2 humpback whales to save humanity. It makes no sense. Unless it's true. It only makes sense if Jesus is who he says he is. And if what the Bible says he did really happened. How can we prove it one way or another? We can't. That's why we call such a belief a step of faith. We either accept the testimony we have been given, or we don't. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "A man who was merely a man and said the things that Jesus said would not have been a great moral teacher. He would either have been a lunatic on the level of a man who says he is a poached egg, or else he is the devil himself." The choice, Lewis says, is ours to make. Here's the question. Great question. If Jesus is who he says he is, and we choose to believe he is a lunatic, or something worse, what might become of us? If we, like Pilate, choose not to accept the possibility that there is more than just this earth, this world, would we become so worried about the lives we live we could not comprehend what life in the kingdom Jesus describes might be like? Look at Pilate. He feared what he could see, and that fear controlled him. Pilate bowed before Caesar because Caesar appointed him. And by the way, if he didn't, it probably meant his life. He bowed before the Jewish leaders who could create such havoc that his time as governor might be cut short. He bowed to his vanity because he believed that his position, his power, and his authority made him better than those who stood before him. Jesus said he came to testify to the truth. Gripped by such a fear, Pilate, in another movie like, couldn't handle the truth. And frankly, neither can we. At least not on our own. As our liturgical year comes to an end, we are reminded that God is not limited by the powers of this world. Even though the world may deny God, it does not change things. It does not change the fact that God does exist. And in ways we cannot, ways we choose not to see. Unless we listen to the truth that Jesus testifies to. What is that truth? We are loved. We are loved even though we don't always love the one who loves us. That love makes us know that the words Jesus says are true. That with God's love, we have nothing to fear. Like with Jesus, this love enables us to stand face to face with our accuser, knowing that there is nothing that they can do to this body that God cannot make whole again. It is only in this truth, God's ultimate authority, God's miraculous power is really and truly revealed. The question that then confronts us is, seeing this truth for ourselves, how do we respond? respond? Do we embrace it, knowing that even if we do, there's no guarantees that this life will be any easier? In fact, it actually might be harder. Or do we ignore it, so fearful of the pain and suffering the world in which we live might cause us, that the thought of putting our trust, putting our hope into something that is unseen, something that we cannot prove exists, just seems too illogical? When this decision is made, looking only at its impact on this life, it's kind of like Star Trek's Kobayashi Maru. It is a no-win scenario. The only way to win is to alter the conditions, to inject into the scenario a way out. Here's the thing. Unlike Captain Kirk in the movies, we can't do that on our own. But because we are loved, a way out has been given. And those who know they are loved are shown the way through the pain and dangers and hardships they face to a place where there'll be no longer any weeping or gnashing of teeth. Place where they are forever engulfed in the love of the one who loves us. Love gives us hope. And with hope, there's nothing to fear. Because the power of love, God's love, is greater than all the combined powers of all the